If I had a magic wand, I would make sure that the Human Rights Commission and the Public Protector take their work seriously. We didn't really need Mkhwanazi. If the Public Protector was not sleeping on its job, what Mkhwanazi revealed is something that they should have dealt with proactively. Where is the Public Protector? Because every day you listen to the news bulletin, there's something reported about corruption in one sphere or the other of the government. You read newspapers, there are endless complaints about corruption. Justice is as expensive in South Africa as it was under apartheid. Under apartheid, we used to say justice is the preserve of the wealthy. I don't think much has changed. One of the things that pain me is that you have a lot more white people going to court and asserting their right to equality than you have black people. The rights of black people to equality are not denied in South Africa. The reality is that we don't hear about it because they don't have the money to approach the courts.
Sloan, you are back.
I am indeed.
Reluctantly, as usual.
You guessed that right.
Yazi uzongixabanisa noNtsiki because uNtsiki makakubiza uyagijima. Kodwa mina mangikufuna lana I must entertain ama explanation amaningi.
You must ask uNtsiki ukuthi ubaba wakhe wenza njani makabize yena.
Hayi angizingeni family issues they can resolve between themselves, but mina I'm gonna keqa her if she keeps inviting you, just so you can at least, be more amenable to honoring my invite.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll think about it.
No, don't think about it. It must be done.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, anyway, for coming. So, yeah.
Thanks. I'm pleased to be here in spite of what you've just said.
Yeah, so today I wanted umkhabulo, basically. Ne?
Okay.
And then I want umkhabulo. Of course, all episodes on Fireside are about umkhabulo, but this is more so. And Mfuna, I want us to talk about we have a government in place. We have things that, we expect out of government, and we have institutions that have been created to enable the functioning of government. And I think it's important for us to understand the workings of government and all the institutions that come with that. And I thought delving into Chapter 9 institutions today would be a good idea. Firstly, in terms of the education, but also in terms of your views on their effectiveness since they've been established. Right?
Okay.
Cool. So let's kick off with you telling us firstly, what are Chapter 9 institutions and what is their role?
Well, I'm going to refer to the Constitution which creates them. Chapter 9 institutions are institutions which, in terms of the Constitution, were created in order to strengthen what the Constitution calls constitutional democracy. And let me just name them. You've got the Public Protector, you've got the Human Rights Commission, you've got the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Communities. You have the Commission for Gender Equality. You have the Commission for, the Auditor General, and then you've got the Electoral Commission. Those are the commissions which, in terms of the Constitution, when people speak about Chapter 9 institutions, those are the institutions that they are speaking about. Now, as you can see, there are 6 of them. So what I would suggest then we focus on for today, it's the Public Protector and the Human Rights Commission.
Cool.
How do you want to do this? Do you want me to just ramble on, or do you want to...
So part of my question, which you've answered in part, is what is their role, right? Mm-hmm. So let's go deeper into those two. What specifically you've indicated that they are, institutionalizing it, democracy, enabling all of that. But what does that mean in practice? Masiti, maskulumang a public protector, what does it mean? What's their role? Maskulumang a Human Rights Commission, what does it mean as well? What do they do day to day?
Okay, but before we talk about what their constitutional mandate is, which briefly I've already alluded to, namely Uguti, they were created in order to strengthen constitutional democracy. But I think it is important to have an understanding of this thing which they are designed or created in order to strengthen. So the first question for me would be, what is constitutional democracy? Because if we don't know what constitutional democracy is, then we don't know what they are created in order to strengthen. Now, but that also has two components which I think it is necessary to unpack. First, I will start with democracy, and then I'll talk about the qualifier which says constitutional. Democracy is generally understood to be a form of government in which power resides with the people. And that's why it's called democracy. It's a derivative from a Greek word. Now, what this means is people can either exercise the power directly or they can exercise it through elected representatives. Now, when the term democracy was first propagated, it was in the context of the old order in Europe. And in the old order, the king ruled supreme, and in fact, the king was thought to rule by what was referred to as the divine rights of kings. So kings were thought of as God's representative on earth. And therefore, you couldn't argue with them, because everything they said, it was taken that it is God saying it through them. But that led, among other things, to the French Revolution in 1789. And part of the movement which led to this revolution was the work of what people generally refer to as French philosophers. And one of the more important ones was Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his social contract, he propagated the views that we are using even today. When you hear people saying democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, what they are saying, they are reciting what Rousseau said in his book, The Social Contract.
They also have not been exposed to my Nigerian friend. You remember when I was still in varsity and I lived in Yeovil, Snowbone?
Yeah.
And he would call democracy them all crazy. Which I think is a more accurate representation of the system. But anyway, I disturbed you.
He is not alone in that. You might like to know that Neville Alexander, may his soul rest in peace, when he spoke about South Africa, he didn't say South Africa is a democratic country. He said it's a demo-crazy country. But now, you see, in South Africa before 1994, we had what was called parliamentary sovereignty. So Parliament was ruling sovereign, and nobody could argue against anything which Parliament had legislated. But when the changeover came in 1994, the powers that be or that were at the time did not trust parliamentary sovereignty in the hands of black people. And so they thought it was necessary to constrain it and call it constitutional democracy. And in fact, before the negotiations started, F.W. de Klerk said, we are going to negotiate a constitution that is cast in stone in such a manner that it doesn't matter who sits in Danes, they cannot change what the constitution says. But that was all because white people did not trust sovereignty placed in black hands. And so the idea of a constitutional democracy came about. So now when the Constitution says these Chapter 9 institutions are there in order to strengthen constitutional democracy and not just democracy, we have to understand what in effect they are saying. Okay, that is the first leg of the inquiry. Then I have indicated that in a democracy, power resides with the people, and that they exercise this power either directly or through elected representatives. In Rousseau's social contract, he actually argued for direct democracy, not democracy through representation. In I think it is Belgium, there's a law professor there called Bert van Roermond. And what he argues is that direct democracy is not possible. And that representative democracy is not a choice among, in a menu of possibilities. It is in fact the only real choice. But what that means then is that we have to keep those people that we elect in control in order to make sure that they respect our mandate. But our mandate is, of course, in the context of South Africa now constricted by the Constitution, because before the Constitution was adopted, there were constitutional principles, and I think they were 35 in number.
Can I take you back?
Yeah.
When Bert says direct democracy is not possible, what's the rationale for that? Let's not take for granted that it's obvious.
If you implement direct democracy, there would have to be a referendum on every piece of legislation. For instance, the people would have to vote directly for any piece of legislation. There would have to be a referendum on everything.
So what he's really relaying is that it's not practical, not that it's not possible. It would be costly, it would be inefficient, it would be all of those,
that sort of
things.
thing. Yeah.
Perfect. We can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I was saying the fact that we elect representatives conveys a duty on us to monitor them. In order to ensure that they remain faithful to the mandate that we have given them. And then I was also saying the mandate that we can give them is restricted by the constitutional principles which tell you in advance what is possible and what is not possible. So when you give a mandate to the people that you elect, that mandate has to be consistent with the constitutional principles. You couldn't, for instance, in the words of A.V. Dicey, because you see, the people usually say, the Parliament of Britain is sovereign and it can do anything it pleases. And then A.V. Dicey in his constitutional law says, but it can't order the killing of all blue-eyed babies. So even though Parliament is sovereign, there are natural limitations. But in our case, it's not just natural limitations, it's also things which were negotiated and agreed to at CODESA. So now, I want us to take a brief stop, and I'm going to be fairly brief on it. What are we as taxpayers coughing up in order to sustain the public protector and in order to sustain the Human Rights Commission? Because at some point we have to ask, are we getting the value for our money from the work that they are doing?
Some of us ask ourselves that, and the answer is a very strong no. Definitive no.
Well, we must talk about that and see where the conversation leads. But in the financial year 2022-2023, the South African Human Rights Commission got from government an amount of 208.9 million rands for that year. And then the public protector in the financial year 2023-2024, they got from government an amount of 366.1 million rands. Now, those are huge amounts of money. And if we were an active citizenry, we would be asking the question at every turn, what are you doing with our tax money? What are we getting from these huge amounts that we are paying for your function? And I am going to move into that. The public protector their power is regulated by Section 182 of the Constitution. The print is so small.
Yeah, I was wondering, given what you usually say about how much you've aged lately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of Section 182 of the, and there are many responsibilities, but I'm going to focus just on one. It says here the public protector has the power as regulated by national legislation. And then A, it says to investigate any conduct in state affairs or in the public administration in any sphere of government that is alleged or suspected to be improper or to result in any impropriety or prejudice. I think that is the most important constitutional mandate that they carry. Now, are they delivering on that mandate? That's the inevitable question.
I understand that there's a constitution that calls into existence these institutions, and let's stay with the public protector since we are there. But why couldn't government do its job without the public protector monitoring it?
Well,
when especially in the context of what you've said, with an active citizenry that holds its government to account, should be capable of doing that. And then there's also, other structures of government, different levels of government, and then where we've seen also that people have taken government to court to enforce certain things where possible. And I get that it's more expensive. And even that, I would want to look at the assumption of it being more expensive in the context of the figures you've shared, number one, but also in terms of, I think the existence of these institutions is made even more expensive by the fact that we are forking out the money, but we're not getting the value, so can't even look at this. If you look at that, it's more costly than the figures that you've indicated.
I think that it is important to understand that a lot of political and legal developments, they are history is informed by what happened in the past. Now, because we had a government which was a law unto itself before 1994, there was a lot of fear that the ANC might just take that tradition forward. And so it was necessary to create a number of watchdogs in order to make sure that the ANC does not do what the National Party government did. And so these Chapter 9 institutions were called into existence in order to mitigate the possibility that the ANC might do what the National Party government did. Quite frankly, in itself, I don't think that that is a bad thing. In fact, I think we should always have had a public protector. But the big issue for me is not whether we should have a public protector or not. I accept that we should. But does it carry out its mandate? Can I go to bed at night and sleep peacefully knowing that I've got a protector? And I think an active citizenry should be worried about that rather than about whether we should have a public protector or not. So now, you see, I've just indicated what the Constitution says. The expectation is that the public protector will investigate whenever there are issues about any arm of the state, whether at local government, provincial government, or national government. It is their constitutional task to investigate such things. Now, we all know that South Africa is rife with corruption. And corruption is an impropriety, exactly as the Constitution is speaking about. The big question for me is, where is the public protector? Because every day you listen to the news bulletin, there's something reported about corruption in one sphere or the other of the government. You read newspapers, there are endless complaints about corruption. Now, shouldn't the public protector, in terms of what Section 182 of the Constitution says, be investigating and preempting those things? Why was it necessary, for instance, to have a General Mkhwanazi in order for us to hear the things that we are hearing presently about the state being, or rather I shouldn't cast the thing too wide. Let me confine it to what General Mkhwanazi complained about, the criminal justice system. Why did the public protector not pick it up long before Mkhwanazi raised the issue? And in my view, they were sleeping on the job.
Of course.
That's the only explanation I can give. They were sleeping on the job and therefore they didn't pick it up.
And they are strangely quiet, by
Well,
the way, even in the aftermath.
That's the next point. That's the next point I wanted to go to. After Mkhwanazi woke them up, why are they so quiet about it, as if it's not one of the things which they should have been in the lookout for in any event, even if Mkhwanazi had not spoken? They are still sleeping on the job, in spite of the revelations that Mkhwanazi has made. And the other thing which flows out of that, speaking about costs, the Madlanga Commission is costing the taxpayer billions. Now, what are we paying those billions for when we have a constitutionally sanctioned organ of state which should be dealing with those things? Just why are we having the Madlanga Commission? Now, credit to the public protector under Thuli Madonsela. Let's give some credit there. Because, you see, the Madonsela report came out in 2016 about state capture. So at least the public protector did something there. But here's the issue. State capture did not start in 2016. Why does the public protector only raise the issue in 2016? If you read about state capture in South Africa, many people trace it back to 1997. Why was, and the public protector was already in existence at the time. Why did it take a Thuli Madonsela? What was the public protector doing between 1997 and 2016 in order to prevent state capture? Now, recently there's another indication that you've heard about this flight bringing in Palestinians.
The Palestinians.
Yeah. There's a complaint which is brewing now that the Department of DECO, what is it? DECO? What is the full? It used to be Foreign Affairs before. Department of International Relations and Cooperation, that sort of thing. There's a complaint that it has been infiltrated, and that it has been infiltrated, interestingly enough, by an organization we think very kindly of, Gift of the Givers. And that this plane bringing in Palestinians to South Africa, the complaint is that the government knew nothing about that, but that the giver of givers knew every detail about that flight. And one wants to ask the question, what is the public protector doing about these infiltrations? Because these are all instances of impropriety, which the Constitution says they should be investigating and reporting on. Okay. Now, it seems to me pretty clear that the public protector has been sleeping on its job, on its constitutional mandate for a very long time, and that they might still be sleeping on their job even as we speak. What about the Human Rights Commission? Or just before I speak about the Human Rights Commission, I've indicated that some people say state capture dates back to 1997. What exactly are they referring to? This whole phenomenon of cadre deployment is what many people see as the initial illustrations of state capture in South Africa. Now, many people have been complaining. I mean, a lot of things have collapsed in South Africa, not because they had to collapse, but because incompetent people have been appointed in high places in government and resulted in inefficiency, resulted in neglect of the duties that the government is charged to carry out. Why has the public protector, for instance, been quiet on the issue of cadre deployment in South Africa? I think we need answers to those sort of things. But we can only raise these questions, as I have already suggested, if we have a politically conscious citizenry. But now I must point out that it is not an accident that we don't have that kind of citizenry. I may have pointed it out in the previous episode that one of the first things which the ANC demobilized was an active civil society that would have helped mediate these things. In fact, in the words of Nelson Mandela, he said, you have been fighting all this time for democracy. You have democracy now. What do you need watchdogs for? Yeah, what do you need watchdogs for? And so an active political citizenry got demobilized in that sort of way. But I think it is time that we called it back into active existence.
Yeah, but it's also, this is the reason you are here, right? We are having this podcast so that we firstly make this information available and accessible to more people than the likes of you who make it their life's mission to know these things and work with it anyway, right? But it's also, I mean, it's reversing the effects of that, and it's not just Utatu Madiba who was culpable here. There's all sorts of other players and institutions who have deliberately and incessantly just driven that message, and it's through platforms like these that I'm hoping we can, educate people. But also, we because, in part, because they are sleeping on the job, as you've pointed out, we had a conversation, was it May, when that deadline, was it March or May, that deadline that was looming around submissions around constitutional review?
It was May.
Yeah. That, even me, and I live with the likes of you, so I've got more information than the average person, you could argue. But even I forget about the existence of these bodies because they are sleeping on the job. And it's important that we highlight these things and bring visibility to these things so that people know that, hey, actually, government, you took my money, my taxes, to fund these things. Can you just deliver something to me? So thank you.
No, absolutely, thanks. I want to move to the Human Rights Commission. Their mandate is also set out in the Constitution. I don't want to get into all those details, but in this book, I discuss their mandate and how they are carrying it out.
Just hold it up and say what the name of the book is.
The name of the book is Socio-Economic Rights in the South African Constitution, Theory and Practice. And I discuss, for instance...
Don't be shy about saying I'm the author.
Well, as you know by now, I've always argued that there's a huge difference between consultants and academics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to go there. Let's focus.
But anyway, you see, in discussing the Human Rights Commission, I'm not going to base myself on their mandate as it is set out in the Constitution. I would like to talk, because you see, the Constitution says what their mandate is, and then it also says they will do such other things as are mandated by national legislation. Now, in terms of the Human Rights Commission, one of those pieces of legislation is the Human Rights Commission Act, which creates the Human Rights Commission. Now, here's the issue. Many people say South Africa has one of the best constitutions in the world. And so we are celebrated for having one of the best constitutions in the world. Now, given that we have one of the best constitutions in the world, one might expect that we don't have the sort of problems that we have in South Africa, but we have those problems in any event. So, for instance, Justice is as expensive in South Africa as it was under apartheid. And in some respects, it is even more expensive now than it was under apartheid. Under apartheid, we used to say justice is the preserve of the wealthy. I don't think much has changed. Justice is still in South Africa as much a preserve for the rich as it was in the old order. And I would dare say, in some respects, even more so than it was in the old order. Now, part of the reason for that is that you see, when the ANC took over in 1994, the unemployment figures in South Africa, as I've pointed out before, were standing at 19%. Today, they are hovering around 45%. So, if the unemployed population has increased so much between 1994 and 2025, it stands to reason that fewer people can afford justice than could afford it in 1994. It's a simple matter of logic. But even the people who are employed in South Africa, an overwhelming majority of them can't afford the money that is needed in order to get justice in South Africa. And let's make it plain. You see, in the old South Africa, you had the Supreme Court and you had the Appellate Division. The Appellate Division was the highest court in the land. In South Africa, presently, you have, in the place of the Supreme Court, you have the High Court, and then above the High Court, you have the Supreme Court of Appeal, and above the Supreme Court of Appeal, you've got the Constitutional Court. Now, before a dispute is resolved finally, whereas in the old order, you had 2 layers of courts to work through, presently, you have 3. Now, I have indicated previously that one of the things that I have a lot of pain about is that there's more litigation around equality by white people in South Africa than there is by black people. Black people have, for the longest of time, been on the receiving end of inequality. Now, in a democratic South Africa, it is white people who are complaining about inequality and accessing the courts in order to enforce their right to equality, and not black people. Now, this is the point at which I want to talk about the Human Rights Commission. One of its mandates...
Can I just say something? Don't lose that train of thought, because we're talking about the cost being prohibitive. The other thing that I find prohibitive in accessing my rights with these institutions, is their inefficiency just puts me off. The time it takes for them to get, even, in court, in formal courts right now, it's ridiculous. Who has time for that?
You see, courts have very strict time frames for citizens to do things.
Yeah, they don't comply.
They will tell you, for instance, that if you haven't filed your action by such and such a date, you lose your right to file any complaint about that. Your claim prescribes, as they say. Now, in America, they've got a very interesting phrase. They refer to these rules as hurry up and wait rules. because the
Gotta
courts,
love Americans.
the courts push you to back-breaking speed in order to make sure that you honor their timelines. And then once you have honored their timelines, it takes forever for them to deal with your complaints. Now, part of the problem here is courts are not accountable.
Yeah.
The reality of the situation is that courts are holding everybody to account, but who holds them to account? They are not accounting to anybody for their failures and negligence, and there's a lot of miscarriages which are taking place in the judicial system. And I know I'm saying this at great risk because you see, but I think these things need to be said.
Yeah.
Because you see, courts are so accustomed to being a law unto themselves that if you criticize them, they've made rules in order to curtail criticism, you are charged with contempt of court. Whereas you can criticize anybody as seriously and aggressively as you can, but when you criticize courts, you've got to tame your language because otherwise you will be found guilty of contempt. But the reality of the situation is, speaking here today, for instance, I have something pending in the High Court. I still don't have a date, but the matter was filed more than 5 years ago. I still don't have a date. So I can relate to that. It's not just a matter of justice being inaccessible because of money, but justice is also inaccessible because of the way in which courts do or don't do their work. Now, let's spend some time on that because this is an argument I've been having with a number of people already. I have raised the issue. Why do we continue paying the salary of a judge post-retirement?
Oh, guys.
Why can't judges provide for their old age in the same way that all of us are expected to provide for our old age?
Right.
Now, whenever I have raised this question, people say to me, but Mandla, you must understand, judges don't quite retire because even when they have retired, they can be called upon to do judicial work. Now, there are many judges on retirement in South Africa presently, but whom we are still paying as if they were active. If there's a backlog created by the fact that there's a shortage of judges in South Africa, why don't they call upon these judges that we are paying in any event?
Precisely.
In order to mediate the backlog that we are having, which results in cases dragging forever. I was speaking to somebody earlier in the year who received in 2025 a trial date falling, I think it was in 2028. So yes, that is an issue. But let's go back to the cost issue.
Yeah.
In terms of the Human Rights Commission Act, the Act says the Human Rights Commission can bring an action in any competent court on its own name or in the name of another person or group of people or a class of persons. So, honestly speaking, there should be nobody in South Africa who says I can't access justice because I don't have money. All we would need is approach the Human Rights Commission with an affidavit and say, here is my case, evaluate the case and see whether it has merits. If it doesn't have merits, that's a different thing. But if it has merits, I don't understand why the Human Rights Commission is not kept as busy as it should be kept in terms of its own finding Act of Parliament. So there again, you have another Chapter 9 institution sleeping on the job.
Yeah, you know, you talk about this whole hurry up and wait thing. This memory that you've triggered is not to do with the Public Protector and the Human Rights Commission, but it's a similar state body funded by our taxes as well as other ways of funding it. I've got a matter that they're dealing with for me, and you know, the amount of time they've spent, the amount of chasing I've even had to do, you know, following up on things. And then where they killed me is in exactly what you're saying, that when it's them talking about these things, they tell you all sorts of things around what time frames and whatever. They say to me, I'm a creature of statute. And I'm like, I wish you would comply with your
Statute. Exactly.
Precisely, I wouldn't have to spend so much time and energy chasing you if you understood that. Right now, I'm being prejudiced because I feel like you don't get that you're a creature of statutes. Can we just move on, please?
Well, you know, judges will tell you that they are not creatures of statute.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's a different kind of challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we must also understand that aside from all the other issues that we're talking about, it used to be that the profession, you know, we could say, for instance, sober as a judge, and we could believe it. We can't believe it, and it dates back to a former judge that I will not name, lest I have stones thrown at me, but also the levels of, you know, corruption and how, I mean, these people are so susceptible to being corrupted themselves that you can't even, there's no integrity in the system anymore. And it really, I often sit, because I'm crazy like that, and wonder, why on earth must I abide by the law when the system is operating the way that it is? I mean, how do you hope to incentivize any citizen to take the law seriously when the system itself is as corrupt as it is?
Yeah. But you see, many people who elevate the judicial system to these sort of levels, they take a view of the judicial system which has nothing to do with the history of the institution. Because courts as we know them today arose in England in the 12th century. Now, when they arose, there was a serious struggle. I've already spoken about the divine rights of kings to rule, but there was a serious struggle between Parliament in England and the king. But because judges were appointed by the king told them what their decisions should be. So there was a serious struggle between the British Parliament and the royal, or rather the courts, because judges were seen as lackeys of the king. And in fact, many judges in England were sentenced to death because of corruption. So this idea that judges can never be corrupt, I don't know where it comes from, because historically they have been some of the most corruptible people.
So we buy it when they say it.
Yeah. But you see, you could also not grow up in South Africa during the time that I grew up in and think of judges as incorruptible. Because just think about this. Everybody knows, for instance, how Steve Biko died. But you had a judicial inquest saying that nobody was to blame for his death. How do you come to that position? We know how Joseph Mdluli died, but nobody was held responsible for his death. Courts making these decisions. We know how Ahmed Timol died, but nobody was held responsible. The courts held nobody responsible. But you see, in South Africa, at least in the old South Africa, there were no pretenses. The rule was, if the law is clear and it is in direct contradiction with justice, the rule prevails over justice.
I so believe.
Yeah, that was the legal
mess
position.
around.
Yeah, there was no pretense.
Yeah.
A guy who dented that a little bit was the late Justice John Didcot, who he was in the Durban High Court or Supreme Court as it was in those days, and when 1994 came, he became a judge of the Constitutional Court. But there was a case which is simply referred to as in re Dube. You see, Dube was arrested for being unemployed. But Dube was epileptic and he couldn't really hold down any job. He had such serious epilepsy, he couldn't hold down any job. But in terms of the law, he was unemployed. He was a black person, unemployed, and therefore he was arrested. Now, the law was that we didn't even appear in magistrates' courts if you were arrested for such a thing. You were sent to what was called a Bantu Affairs Commissioner's Court. So Dube appears in the Bantu Affairs Commissioner's Court, and the law was saying he must give an account of an honest source of livelihood, and if he doesn't, the court must declare him an idle and undesirable Bantu and sentence him to a labor colony. But the saving grace was that a judge of the Supreme Court had to certify that what was done to him was in accordance with justice. Now, fortunately for Dube, this case landed on Didcot's desk. And Didcot looked at it, looked at the facts, and then Didcot says, in terms of the law in South Africa, any act passed by Parliament is law, just or unjust, and I must give effect to it as a judge. But in this case, I am not required to certify that what happened to Dube is in accordance with the law. What I am required to certify is that it is in accordance with justice, and it is not. And therefore he freed John Dube.
Good for him.
Yeah. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is, okay, recently we've heard about judges accepting bribes. And these things do happen, and what I'm saying is anybody who has a historical perspective of how courts arose historically would be less generous in terms of the accolades that are given to courts.
What are the implications, though, to me as a citizen in terms of, abiding by the law? What do I do when I get frustrated by these observations?
Well, the interesting thing is I've now spoken about the public protector, and I have indicated what its constitutional mandate is. Now, it will interest you to know courts don't account to anybody.
Yeah.
And because of the belief that courts are perfect, the Constitution does not allow the public protector to investigate courts. The
Are you
public protector
serious?
can investigate any department of government, any functionary of the state, except courts.
Wow,
But you see,
I didn't know that.
yeah, no, it's in the Constitution, not allowed to investigate courts. Now, your question is, what can I do as a citizen? The reality of the situation is that in law, you've got no recourse. What they will tell you is, if the magistrate's court has misserved you, you can go to the high court and appeal. If the high court misserves you, you can go to the Supreme Court of Appeal. If the Supreme Court of Appeal misserves you and it's a constitutional issue, you can get to the Constitutional Court, by which time your pockets will be nicely empty.
And my energy will be depleted. By their inefficiency.
Yeah. So there is no legal recourse in terms of that once you have gone beyond the Constitutional Court. But here's an example that I want to give, which perhaps citizens ought to think about. Scientists used to believe that they are not accountable to society, and that they are
still
only...
do.
Sorry.
They still do.
No, but that has been tempered with... They can't say it as openly as they said it before. They even spoke about the Republic of Science, because they were saying they are accountable only to scientists. But society was up in arms and said to them, the things you do impact on us. Now, to say you are not accountable to us, whereas you are messing up our world, is totally unacceptable. And so scientists were forced to accept that they are accountable to society in the end. I think we need to build a civil society movement which reminds the judicial system that we are impacted by their decisions in more ways than we are impacted by the decisions of Parliament, by the way. Because Parliament can pass a law and courts will interpret that law in particular ways which have an impact on us. You know, in 1995, when the Constitutional Court decided that the death penalty is unconstitutional in South Africa, one of the people who dealt with this thing is one Ian Glauber, who was an engineer in Roodepoort. He wrote a book because, you see, the reasoning of the Constitutional Court, among other things, was that the death penalty is in any event not serving its purpose as a deterrent, because it's not deterring anybody. So Ian Glauber, being an engineer, then says, well, I can design it in such a way that it becomes a deterrent. If your gripe is that it doesn't deter, we can design it. And then he wrote the book in which he argues the matter. But before he published the book, he went to a lawyer whose name I will not mention. But it is one of the top advocates in South Africa. And this advocate looks at the manuscript and says to him, Mr. Glauber, you are a very good engineer. Why don't you just stick with engineering and leave the law alone?
Or better still leave it to lawyers.
No, well, effectively, that's what he meant. Now, I loved Ian Glauber's response to him. And here was Ian Glauber's response. He says, look, I'm an engineer. If I design a bridge which keeps on killing people, and I said to you, you are a lawyer, leave the designing of bridges to engineers, would you accept that? And the advocate was Chupstel. Because here's the interesting thing. Lawyers feel free to speak on any and every subject. But when you speak about law from outside, they shut you out. But we need to build up a civil society movement which reminds them that their acts and decisions affect us, and therefore they must be accountable to us.
Yeah, so if we were to do that, what are the specific things would, have that kind of effect? What could we do as civil society to have that kind of impact? You can talk to it, but what I wanted to say is, helpful as your response was, Mina, my question was more, why should I bother abiding by the law? Honestly, because every time I engage with this thing, it becomes blatantly clear to me that actually this law is meant to regulate me, but the people, abase government, abase mthethweni, everywhere, they play by their own rules, which have nothing to do with abiding by the very laws that we're talking about. So what's in it for me? It's like a scam.
You know that my academic training is in philosophy. Now,
it's the one you prefer. You've also got legal training, you've got other trainings, but you prefer your philosophy background.
Okay. You see, from a philosophical, ethical standpoint, the response that I want to give to you is this, because
I like the way you're framing it. It pricks my ear. I'm like, okay, I better listen here.
The one of the hallmarks of an ethical decision is whether you can universalize it or not. Now, if you ask the question that you are asking, what you should ask yourself is, what would the world look like if everybody ignored the law? And I guess that answers your question.
No, it doesn't, actually, because I feel like I hear the point you're making, but honestly, I feel like officials are always raping us.
No, I'll come to that. I'll come to that in a moment, because quite frankly, I have asked myself that question a number of times myself. And I have asked myself whether I would be willing to die for South African law, for instance, which I know the people who are charged with taking care of it don't have this much interest in it.
Yeah.
But every time I've asked myself...
Not only taking care of it, also creating it. We create a land if you're not prepared to obey it.
No, I understand why the law is created. What I don't understand is why the people who are required to enforce it behave the way they do. That's the part I don't understand. But every time I have asked myself the question which you are raising, what has kept me back is precisely the question I'm asking you now, because I think it is better that a majority of the people show obedience to the law, even if those who are supposed to take care of the law fail in doing so, and then I will speak about them in a moment. But I just want it to be clear that it is not viable to create a society in which everybody disrespects the law. Because ultimately nobody would be safe. You would not be safe. I'm not saying you are safe now, but your insafety would be worse in a situation where everybody disobeyed the law.
You know, I feel like it's a dog world anyway, and I feel like my odds are better in a context. I'm probably hallucinating, but you asked. But I feel like if I know that nobody's going to obey the law, rather than live with the illusion that the law means something and then learn the things that we're learning every day about how South Africa actually rolls. And it's not limited to South Africa, but let's use the Madlanga Commission as an example. So I'm questioning even the sense that it might be the majority of people are obeying the law. I'm questioning that. That's number one. But number two, I'm like, aren't my odds better when I know and I'm prepared that actually you're on your own, dude? Make a plan. and then I live like it anyway.
Yeah, you see, in the sort of world that you are imagining, the rule would be survival of the fittest. And I don't think that you want that for yourself or even for your children. I think one must do what is necessary in order to create a safe world. I don't think one must look at the mistakes of the bad people that we have entrusted law enforcement to and say
And the
because...
delinquency, not the mistakes.
Yeah, their delinquents, I agree. And then say, because of them, it is better to live by the law of the jungle. I think we must call into life social systems, social movements, which make it unsafe for them to do the sort of things that they are doing, rather than throw out the baby with the bathwater. But a world in which everybody disrespected the law would be unviable, even for yourself. Sorry.
You are forgiven, since you are sorry.
Okay. Yeah. But I really think we have to go back to the ABCs of civil society. You cannot live in civil society without rules. And the issue is not to abandon rules, but to make sure that those we task to uphold the rules do their job. I don't know if you know this guy, Windsor Leroke. I worked with him at the Human Sciences Research Council, but he was a lecturer at Wits University. He is a Foucault scholar, Michel Foucault. And at the time when I heard him make
Just
this...
tell people briefly who Foucault is.
Foucault is a French political philosopher. At the time when I heard Windsor make this argument, I immediately thought education is messing him up. But the more I think about it, the more I see merit in his argument. Because Windsor was arguing that we don't need government. What we need is government by tender. And here's what he was arguing. He was arguing that we should have local committees whose term of office is clearly defined. And then these committees should consult with the community. What are your needs? They should map out the needs of their communities, and then they should put out a tender who is willing to satisfy these needs. So if, for instance, road building is a need, you take out a tender for road building, and somebody tenders, people tender for that, and they cost the whole thing. Now, you engage them strictly for that business. So you also throw out a tender for security. Who can take care of my security? People tender for it, and they cost it. Now, they must provide security within the budget that you have approved. If they overshoot their budget, they don't have the ability to tax you in order to make up the shortfall. They must continue providing the security that they have undertaken to provide within the budget that they have provided. That's just one of the thoughts, for instance, which perhaps we can start popularizing. It's not going to be, it's not something that's going to happen in my lifetime. It's not something that will happen in your lifetime, possibly. But I think that social development starts with conversations such as we are having, people buying into those conversations, people doing something about those conversations, and social change happens.
I really love Windsor, and I don't love him for the reasons that you would think, because I was saying my dad raised me by calling me an anarchist. And you can hear he's essentially saying the same thing even now, that I'm an anarchist. But it's okay, I love him still. Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, whether you want to do it in the form of a government or not, one of the benefits for me of his approach is that this notion of a standing government, yes, we have elections, so the standing is standing in that context, right? But I'm saying, honestly, we don't need one. I agree with him. The size of the government, that keeps growing. Every time somebody is not doing something, or anytime somebody wants to benefit somebody at the personal level, they create a different department or ministry or whatever, with zero thought to the taxpayer, what it's going to take to fund all of that. And then we still have to live with the non-delivery that we have to live with, and you can do it either, in that way by not having a standing government, or by forming a government that is trim. There is, there's nothing stopping us, actually, even with a government, in infusing some of these principles into his theory. So you and Windsor, is Windsor still alive?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, just tell him, please, he must start a movement. I'll support him. Let's get this rolling. Okay. Let's do it so that when we vote, we have real alternatives, because part of the problem with Mzansi right now is that even when you try to think of, okay, I'm unhappy with the ANC, who do I vote for? You come out blank, know. And yet we say that the means to effect change at that level is through elections, yeah. So.
You can vote DA.
The sense of humor is becoming a bit whack now. With Auntie Helen going crazy the way that she's doing. Anywho, let's go back to the recommendation you were making about civil society, right? What are you saying we can do practically to get the outcome that you're advocating for?
Well, look, you are aware that there was a time when the ANC thought that it is untouchable.
When it was going to rule until Jesus returns.
Yes, I was going to say, to the extent that JZ said they will rule until the second coming of Jesus. And in fact, when people like Tera Lekota broke away from the ANC's attitude was, it's cold out there.
Even Juju said that, even though he later himself broke
away. Yeah.
He was the biggest messenger of that.
Yeah. But there are many of these people who broke away and were told it's cold out there. But I think we have come to a point in the evolution of things in South Africa where political parties would be more responsive to civil society pressure than they have been over the past 30 years. I think it was a great disservice to the country to have given the ANC the electoral support that it received. I mean, when it started, it was standing at about 67%, and that created a sense of impunity. But I think we have now evolved to a point where everybody understands that they are vulnerable. But what we need then is to mobilize society so that they raise the correct sort of things. And platforms like yours, platforms like you were speaking about, Unsigi, I think are doing a good job raising that sort of consciousness amongst people. And Usizwe, Sizwe's platform is also doing a lot of good job in terms of that. But I think we should never stop raising political consciousness amongst people so that they raise the correct issues and take advantage of the fact that we have come to a point where every political party is vulnerable now and therefore hopefully more responsive to civil society pressures than they were 30 years ago.
So I get that, and I agree that there can never be a version of reality that, drives shift on these things without civil society, right? But one of my gripes is that machinery moves very slowly, and I don't have the patience for that. I'm particularly impatient with it now. Firstly, you could argue that it's been our own fault. We voted for the ANC. Personally, I haven't, never have, so. But still, the idea of, them being given that authority multiple times, despite us knowing, over the years that, this is a scam, we're not getting what we're being promised. So I find that element is limited in terms of its effectiveness. It must absolutely be part of it. But I would want something more, I'll call it institutional, what consequence, can we implement a system that entails immediate consequences for these officials, men? And I would see, because this is my pet hate, tax, citizens should be allowed to withhold their taxes when government is not delivering, or something similar. Are there any thoughts around that you have, or examples maybe, of, it needn't be this specific one, but others that have worked in other areas that would have us having officials feel the pain more immediately and not waiting until their term of office, and then they have to campaign for the next lot, and then they lie to us more, stuff like that.
I think that you've heard I say platforms like yours and all the others are fulfilling an important role in terms of raising this consciousness, but that creates responsibilities, both for you people who run them and the people that you invite to participate in them. Now, I don't think that one should speak about things on these platforms which might result in the state coming down on you or any of these guys. And therefore, I'm not going to respond to the last question that you have asked because it might just attract the sort of
unnecessary attention.
Yeah.
Which we know, is.
But I do want to say that people who are on a social change trajectory usually take a long-term perspective. It's not a microwave sort of arrangement, which is why in serious countries, people plan for 30 years, unlike South Africa. In South Africa, we plan for 5 years. And we all know what happens as a result of that. But in serious countries, people plan for 30 years and beyond. So as I have already said, a lot of the things that I am advocating in my life, I don't hope to see materialize during my lifetime. But my attitude is that I should be used as just one of the building bricks. So the things that we are talking about here today, I would suggest must also be seen as building bricks. And we shouldn't be so impatient about the slowness of the wheel that we cut our noses.
And where do we strike the balance in terms of maintaining sanity and acceptable levels of patience and being careful not to enable unaccountability from these authorities?
One of the mandates of the Human Rights Commission is to educate society about human rights. And it's not doing that job. It's sleeping on even that job, apart from what we spoke about earlier. Now, I do think that we should make noise as civil society about it, that we are paying taxes so that this should happen. Why is it not happening?
So I feel that I hear you and I accept what you say. It's a legit solution. But like I'm saying, people do make noise, maybe not as broadly as they should. And still there's nothing. And quite frankly, these authorities have the power to get away with this. And that's what frustrates me.
Yeah. Look,
they inflict themselves on me, and...
People will get away with murder if you let them. And what I'm saying is we should shrink the space in which people get away with murder.
Okay. Let's continue then let's use that example. We shrink that space. We hold the Human Rights Commission accountable for educating the country on human rights as an example. What other avenues do we have?
Well, we also hold the public protector accountable for not doing what it should. Like I've already indicated, we didn't really need Mkhwanazi. If the public protector was not sleeping on the job, what Mkhwanazi revealed is something that they should have dealt with proactively. And we should insist that such things happen. But in our small living spaces, we should also raise consciousness about these things. I attended a memorial service yesterday. I'm not going to say whose memorial service it was, but I attended a memorial service yesterday, and there were very educated people there speaking in memory of the deceased. And I can't say with a clean conscience that I left that memorial service satisfied that these people understand the problems of South Africa. So part of the problem we have is that we assume that people know the problems of South Africa, but that assumption is not founded. So in our small living spaces, we should tirelessly raise consciousness, political consciousness, amongst the people that we walk around. Now, I'm not saying it's an easy thing. I know it's a very difficult thing to do. You see...
I know that part is meant for me, designed to manage me.
No,
but
no,
that's
no,
fine.
No. No, it's not designed. In fact, I appreciate what you are doing. But I'm laughing because I'm very alive to the way in which people respond to me when I raise these things. We were in Middelburg on Saturday and on Sunday. It was a get together of people who are 60 and above. Now, I can't tell you how people moved away from every table which I approached because people don't want to hear what I'm talking about. So I'm alive to that, but I'm not giving up.
Yeah. Okay. So answer me this then, because, there's wisdom, and that's the other thing that my dad used to say to me growing up, that you can be clever, but you're not always so wise. So I try to to remember these lessons, but in my attempts, to be wise, I do also think that being too patient can also be a problem. I think if we had more impatient people, life would be different, right? That's one. But two, some of the things that our state is doing, they're literally selling off our country. South Africa is not a sovereign country anymore. And half the time we don't even know until it's too late. We learn after the fact, and whether we like it or not, their conduct, it may not lead there immediately, just by their conduct. They are leading citizens like me, to a particular state of mind, and at some point, we're going to decide that, okay, enough is enough. And we're not going to be as, polite or professional or sophisticated in our response when we get there. So from where I sit, I'm trying to explain that I am finding it taxing on South Africans. Taxing, literally, yes, we taxed out of our ears, but I'm finding it burdensome, basically, to expect that as South Africans, as taxpayers, as citizens, for the stability, the country's stability relies on us being patient, on us being tempered, measured in our response to all of this nonsense. And I don't think that it's sustainable. I would be more interested in a proposition that looks at how we review governance in such a way that it enables us to hold government accountable quicker than what we've been able to date, and implement consequences where they feel it, that if we don't do this, then there is going to be a consequence, not only for us, and if it means, the country suffers a little bit, I feel like there's no suffering that could be worse than what we're going through, honestly. So for me, it's not a sales pitch to me to say you destabilizing the country with the things you're saying. And I'm also saying that, their actions are the reasons we feel this way. So if there's something that needs to be looked at, of course, you're a sane person, and you rein me in. I love that. That's the role you play. And you're not the only one. There are lots of other people, and that's necessary to have different people with different temperaments looking at these things. But at the same time, man, I'm like, can we please? So I'm looking for those mechanisms that we can implement that at least enable me to hear you when you say, okay, be tempered in this way. But I can't be expected to hold off indefinitely. So what do you say to someone like me who's like, had enough now?
Well, look, I'm not saying people should be patient with what is happening. That type of impatience is not only justified, but also necessary. Because South Africa is in the state in which it is because we've been patient for more than 30 years. So that's not what I'm asking for. The response I gave was to a specific issue which you had raised, that you want something that will show results immediately.
Or quicker. Maybe immediately was the wrong word.
Yeah. But you see, the difficulty you have, or we have, is that the system has put in place certain time frames in respect of which things can be done, in respect of which people can be recalled, and so on and so on. Incidentally, this is part of Windsor's proposal, because what Windsor says is if you give somebody a contract to look after your security, for instance, the service level agreement will specify time frames, it will specify targets. You will say by such and such a time, this is what I want to see. And if you don't, Windsor says you don't have to wait for 5 years. You terminate immediately once the person has failed. But, and as I have said, I am beginning more and more to see sense in Windsor's proposal. But unfortunately, that's not where we are presently. The rules for changing things, the rules for recalling people are set by the very people that we are complaining about. But what I am also saying then is, and I've said this already, I'm repeating myself, we need to create a build-up of social pressure, which does not say to them they have the luxury of 5 years. And I think it's possible to create that with the appropriate raising of political consciousness. And I think more and more we are beginning to see that in South Africa, where people are showing healthy impatience with politicians. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. It's something that we have to work at with single-mindedness, but also understanding that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I must just make this point. You like Vladimir Putin. I like Vladimir Lenin even more. Now, one of the things he was emphatic about in the context of the Russian struggle was that there are questions which you don't debate in conferences.
Angiyakuzwa Seleoane, but qhubeka. I hear you.
And those happen to be the most critical questions, but you don't raise them in a conference room.
Wisdom, once again, going back to...
Yes, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, it's just very frustrating because,
I understand.
You know, we are here, and then I also, by the way, believe we can talk about incompetence with our officials, ne? But there's something in me that says that's not the whole story, because when it suits them, I mean, SARS is forever exceeding their targets in collecting. When they want, where it suits them, they can be so competent and so efficient, so innovative. It's only when it comes to delivering services to us, and honestly, I cannot tell you how unhappy. It makes me miserable. So that's where I'm coming from. And it's really just more, for me, it's more about them not caring. They don't give a rat's ass, honestly.
No, look, when I was a columnist for the Herald in Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha now, one of the issues I raised was that knowingly or unknowingly, the African National Congress is discrediting the law because, and it's not just SARS, the way the ANC is using the law is as a source of income generation. And that discredits any respect that any person might have for the law. If you see the law not as something which protects you, but as something which milks you, you develop resistance to that sort of thing. And They have also discredited SARS quite significantly because they have political differences with you, they use SARS. And SARS has been like
A weapon.
Yeah,
They've weaponized it.
Yeah. So I understand what you are saying, and it's something that has to change. Things have to be done because they are right, not because they bring in money.
Yeah, okay. Let's leave that bit. Let's go to a much more helpful conversation on the role of the Human Rights Commission. We spoke about the role they play in educating the masses. Well, they should be playing. What else? I mean, if we were to flesh out the scope of work, just to, educate people so that when they engage with the entity, they know what to expect from them. What other functions would you highlight that affect people on a day-to-day that we can now start this movement of holding them accountable for delivering?
I've spoken about litigation, which in my view is even more important than the other stuff that we are speaking about, because if the Human Rights Commission can help people to access justice, they would be appreciated even if they failed in every other respect.
Can you give us a few examples, 2 or 3, of where they can't, for instance, help me in a criminal matter if I'm correct, right? What sort of legal matters can they look to the Human Rights Commission to assist them with?
Look, in spite of everything everybody says in South Africa and elsewhere, there are still frightening levels of racial discrimination in South Africa. That falls squarely within the mandate of the Human Rights Commission. They should be litigating. I've already said to you that one of the things that pain me is that you have a lot more white people going to court and asserting their right to equality than you have black people. It's not as if the rights of black people to equality are not denied in South Africa. The reality is that we don't hear about it because they don't have the money to approach the courts. The Human Rights Commission could be playing a very important role there. And there, they don't even have to say on behalf of Mandla Seleoane, because it is something they are created to look after. They can investigate. Terry Oakley-Smith and I served in a committee of inquiry, which was created by Sidney Mufamadi when he was Minister of Police. And our mandate was to investigate racism in the SAPS. We did that, but what happened with our findings? Nothing happened with our findings.
She mentioned that, by the way, in a conversation we had when I called, and she was like, the inaction was just alarming.
Yeah, yes. Now, there are, okay, you've got the CCMA, for instance, in South Africa. And you go to the CCMA as an employee. You get a favorable ruling. Your employer has more money than you have. Takes the CCMA decision for review in the labor court. If he loses there, takes it for review to the High Court. Now, let's say, for argument's sake, that he wins at the High Court, but you think he shouldn't have won, but you don't have money to approach the SCA. Now, the right to fair labor practice is in the Bill of Rights. It's in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Now, why don't we hear the Human Rights Commission taking up all these cases which workers can't take up about fair labor rights in the labor court, in the high court, and even going as far up as the constitutional court. They should be doing that. And you see, there's a lot of talk in South Africa about our labor laws not being investor friendly. I think the Human Rights Commission has a role to play there also, educate people that human rights are not inconsistent with investments, but they're not doing it.
So if, as South Africans, we wanted to hold the public protector and the Human Rights Commission for this, what is our recourse? Where do we start? How do we go about it?
Well, fortunately, the Human Rights Commission and the public protector are not protected the way courts are. So, if I had a complaint, for instance, and I took it to the public protector and I felt it was a solid complaint, and the public protector refused to take up the case, I can approach the High Court if I have the money. I can approach the High Court and ask them to review the decision of the public protector not to handle my case. I can go to the High Court and ask them to review the decision of the Human Rights Commission for refusing to help me. You can do that still.
And there's no cheaper alternative, more affordable alternative, because my issue, I mean, you've already indicated that those that access it have the money, hence the demographic profile of the equality claims that you see being addressed. How do we, I mean, we're talking about this ordinary person. There's a blue-collar worker on the shop floor has had that kind of situation at the CCMA. They're not coming right. They go to the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission is not responsive or is turning them down. They don't have the money to spend in the court system. What other alternatives are there?
Okay, I just think we must be careful because you see, the CCMA, for instance, has been created to deal with labor issues. If I go straight away to the Human Rights Commission with a labor issue, the Human Rights Commission will say there's another commission which has been created specifically to deal with that, and I think they would be within their rights to say that.
No, that's not my point. You mentioned, for instance, that when the employer keeps appealing at different levels of courts, that's what I'm dealing with.
Okay. Now, that is not an extra legal issue then, if that's what you are talking about. It's a legal issue. And if you are asking whether there isn't a cheaper way of doing it, no, there isn't. And what the cheaper way to do it is to get the Human Rights Commission to do its job. Because this is a human rights issue. It's in the Bill of Rights. It's in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. And the Human Rights Commission is mandated to litigate in its name or in the name of somebody else where a human rights issue is involved.
So essentially my recourse is to ensure their inefficiency until I come right.
No, but you see, I think we must also accept responsibility for our failures as civil society. Because although the Human Rights Commission has been around for a number of years, I haven't heard of any member of civil society who has approached the Human Rights Commission and said, in terms of your act, you have the obligation to litigate on my behalf. And what I am saying is the conversation we are having here today should have that spin-off that people are now aware that they can go to the Human Rights Commission and say, in terms of the Human Rights Commission Act, you have an obligation to litigate on my behalf, and here's the affidavit. I'm asking you to litigate on my behalf.
Okay. So do you have additional examples in terms of the Human Rights Commission of the kinds of issues? You've mentioned them. I'm just checking for completeness.
Well, any matter which falls within the Bill of Rights, you can.
What's the Bill of Rights? Quick summary.
The Bill of Rights is Chapter 2 of the Constitution, and I'll tell you the things which are dealt with there. You see, in terms of Chapter 2 of the Constitution, everybody has the right to human dignity. So if you feel your human dignity has been assaulted, I don't understand why you can't approach the Human Rights Commission with an affidavit setting out why you think your bill of your human dignity, and then the right of life, your right of life can hardly ever be threatened in South Africa unless it is threatened by criminals. But outside of criminals, it can hardly ever. Your freedom of association, freedom of the person and security. This is a crucial thing. Our security is threatened day in, day out. I don't understand why the Human Rights Commission isn't doing anything about that. Okay, slavery, servitude, and forced labor, I don't think this can ever arise presently in South Africa. And then your right to privacy. If your right to privacy is assaulted, that's something which I think you can take up. Your freedom of religion, belief, and opinion, that's another example. Your freedom of expression, your right to assembly, so long as it's peaceful, but your right to assemble, picket, and protest, petition, your freedom of association, your political rights. Okay, this one is a little bit tricky, but I don't think it's something that can arise quite easily in South Africa, because you are free to form a political organization, you are free to join a political organization of your choice. I don't think it can easily arise. Your right to citizenship, freedom of movement, freedom to trade or to belong to a certain occupation or profession. I'm trying to think of something here without having to think of, but this happens quite a lot in South Africa, but I don't want to mention names now. But it happens quite a lot. It's something that I think the Human Rights Commission can take up. Labor relations, I've already spoken about this. Environmental rights, in fact, driving here, there's an NGO, there's a protest, even as we are speaking, at Total Energies. It's a very station. Yeah. And it's something that the Human Rights Commission could have taken up. It wasn't necessary for it to be taken up by an NGO. And there was an earlier one involving Shell. There again, the Human Rights Commission could have taken it up, but didn't. Property. Now, the people who litigate the most in South Africa about property, again, happen to be white people.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Like, I mean, they're the ones who own the property, so that
Yeah. But you see, in India, the Supreme Court of India, for instance, made a ruling that the right to life must not be interpreted mechanically or restrictively. The Supreme Court of India ruled that if you have the right to life, if your constitution says you have the right to life, it also means you have the right of access to the things which are needed for you to live. Now, it's not as if the Human Rights Commission is not aware of this. We've had these debates endlessly with the Human Rights Commission. They are aware of this, this expansive. Now, the big question then is, can you have the right to life without having the right to adequate housing, to adequate food, to adequate...
Healthcare. When you mess up Tembisa Hospital,
yeah,
and I'm living there and I fall ill and I cannot be helped in any meaningful way because you've decided to give your bodies the money that was supposed to go towards medicines and other infrastructure.
yeah. No, exactly. So it's not just a question of white people already having the property, but also a question of, even if I don't have the property, the Constitution says I've got the right to life. And there is jurisprudence which says the right to life includes the right to the things which are necessary for life. Why is the Human Rights Commission not doing anything about it?
So one of the things I feel very strongly about is education, because even that, quite frankly, me, aside from it being in its own right, being a right that we should be insisting on, also its contribution to life, because how does it affect me? My health depends on my ability, my education on how to attain health, my ability to escape these dodgy unemployments. It's not by any means, the only thing, because there's other things that you talk about around the economy, how it's run, and foreign direct investments that we would have to think about. But certainly laying the foundation in terms of preparing me and positioning me for success, education. Does the Human Rights Commission have a role to play there, and what is that role?
Well, the right to education is in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. So it's part of the Bill of Rights. But there's a catch. The way in which the right is articulated in the Constitution, you've got a right of access to education and not a right to education directly. During the struggle for liberation in South Africa, we used to speak about the right to work. In fact, we spoke about more than that. We said you've got the right and the duty to work, so that you don't just sit there and wait for handouts. Come 1994, what the Constitution says is you don't have the right to work as such. You've got a right to be treated fairly if you get a job. So if you don't get a job, and what they are arguing is a right creates an obligation. I mean, if somebody has a right and then somebody else has an obligation to fulfill that right. And since you can't force a person to employ another person, you can't have the right to work in South Africa. So you might have the best education, that doesn't guarantee you employment. All you are guaranteed in terms of the Constitution is to be treated fairly if you are lucky enough to get a job. But your question was, does the Human Rights Commission have space to maneuver there? Yes, it does have space to maneuver. There was a case in Natal. I'm just forgetting the people who were involved in the case, but it involved the University of Natal. Because somebody made an application and was not admitted and approached the courts and argued that his, what section is it now? Let me just check quickly. But his right to education in terms of, I suspect it might be, okay, let me not, yeah, it's section 29 of the Constitution has been denied. Now, what the court ruled in that case was that if the university's criteria for admitting students are rational, the courts can't interfere. So the inquiry is limited to the rationality of the criteria. Now, what we say about that, I don't know. And then there's also the question about housing. There was the interesting case, the Grootboom case. Now, it was heard initially in the Cape High Court, and the judge presiding there was Dennis Davis. Dennis, his judgment said, I think it's section 27, let me just make sure. It's section 26. Yeah. Dennis said section 26 does not communicate a direct right to housing. So Irene Grootboom, being an adult person, does not have the right to compel the state to provide a house. Because, again, it is a right of access, it's not a direct right. But he then looked at section 28 of the Constitution, which deals with the rights of children. And one of those rights is that children should not be separated from their parents. And
the fringe benefits of being a parent in this case.
And then he said, Section 26 does not confer a right on Irene Grootboom to compel the state to provide a house. And Section 28 says children should not be separated from their parents, and it says children have a direct right to housing. And since children have that right, the state is obliged to provide housing for children. And since they cannot be separated from their parents, by extension, Irene Grootboom had the right and could compel the state. The Constitutional Court overturned that judgment and said, you have...
You're giving us too many headaches when...
You have misapplied the law. And so they reversed Dennis Davis's decision. But if you read this book that I have referred to earlier, there's also a discussion there about what is referred to as executive-minded judges. The risk of having executive-minded judges who, instead of dealing with the rights as they are set out in the Constitution, adopt a sympathetic approach to the executive and start thinking about budgetary implications of reading rights the way they are written in the Constitution, and reading rights down in order to accommodate the need to avoid imposing budgetary obligations on the state. That sort of thing. And of course, I argue in the book, among other things, that even civil and political rights occasionally communicate budgetary obligations on the state. There was, for instance, that case about ARVs. I forget who brought that application.
Was it the Treatment Action Campaign at the time?
Possibly. But the courts ruled that lack of resources is not an excuse. If the drugs are necessary in order for the applicant to survive, and you have imprisoned the applicant, you will find the money to get the drugs and make sure that he gets treatment that he would be able to get. Now, that clearly conveys budgetary obligations on the state. But because it is a civil and political issue, courts interpret it differently than they would interpret it if it were a socio-economic rights.
Interesting. Thank you. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share?
No, I think we have covered much more than I had planned for. Thanks.
So I'm going to give you a magic wand and I need you to behave this time. Forget that it's magic and you don't believe in magic. We're going to impose a belief in magic on you. And you wanted to apply the magic wand on these Chapter 9 institutions, and in particular the two that we spoke about. Where would you apply it? What difference would it make?
Well, if I had a magic wand, I would make sure that the Human Rights Commission and the Public Protector take their work seriously as it is set out in the Constitution and in the pieces of legislation which were passed in order to call them into existence. I would in particular bewitch the Public Protector's Office so that it protects the public fully and protect it not only against the state but against the corporate world also, where such protection is needed, because there's a tendency to think that the bad things that happen only flow from the government, but there's a fair amount of bad things that happen in the country which flow from the corporate world, and I would bewitch the Public Protector's Office so that it protects us from those two.
Powerful.